Welcome back. I'm sure at least some of you were able to get to the bar. There still seem to be huge queues there. I'm sure it'll be open later and you'll be able to get whatever you want. We're about to start, so without further ado, can I please introduce to the stage Professors Richard Dawkins and Lawrence Krauss.
Okay, it works. Okay, well, thank you very much for coming tonight and staying for this, and we hope you enjoyed the movie. So what we'll do is just answer questions, and by tradition, I'll be the bad guy and choose people, and so we'll try and go around the room and choose people, and then answer your questions. So we're open for. I guess there's a microphone. You've got a. Is there just one? Just one. Okay, so watch this guy, and so we'll take, the floor is open. And if there aren't questions, we'll just all go out for a whiskey. But I've already got mine here. I already actually have two here, so. Right at the front.
Thank you so much for the movie, it was amazing. My question's fairly light-hearted, but it's Professor Dawkins.
Good.
I know, you wouldn't expect it. I'm quite saddened to see that you were shown the light of Converse All-Stars in Belfast, and yet you are not wearing Converse.
I'd never even heard of them before.
Did you not find? Did you not find that like a comforting soul was actually beneficial to you?
Well, I'm very interested in soul.
Very good. I like that. Is your mic on, Richard?
Is it not on?
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Yes. Well, it was a very welcome gift that I received in Belfast, and I wore it as a token in London, and then I just simply forgot to bring them this time.
Yeah, I thought Richard might forget, so I brought my Converse, because in London was very nice because we switched, and I had regular shoes and Richard had Converse, and people couldn't tell who was who, so it was really a problem, so that's why we decided to assume our normal identities. Next question, but that was a reasonably good one to begin with.
Hello, thanks for coming. I think my question isn't as light-hearted, so apologies. There's about a 20-second preamble, so is that all right? So this question's for both of you. So Noam Chomsky talks about the attack on the education system. It produces people who are subordinate, who don't question, who cannot critically think. Given that the education system is currently ineffective in not giving young people the ability to critically evaluate opinions objectively, and given that lack of critical thought is a key source for irrational belief, wouldn't redirecting your efforts to attack both the economic and education system actually better serve your goals to reduce the number of believers? The issue to me seems to be one of economics underlying everything. Your thoughts, please.
Okay, well, I'll start. Unless you
no, I didn't understand a word of that.
Well, okay, good. Okay, you could play off my answer then.
Right.
I don't think attacking educational systems. It's true that educational systems everywhere have problems. In my country, perhaps more than here, maybe even. But it seems to, instead of attacking educational systems, it seems to me one should try just work to make them better. And what Richard and I do, I shouldn't speak for Richard, but I'm pretty sure he'll agree, is we try and encourage people to be interested and get excited about the real universe. And that's what educational systems should do. The real problem, it seems to me, is we tend to teach science as if it's a bunch of facts written by 200-year-old dead white men. And instead, we should be getting kids to ask questions, because that's what science is all about. And figure out, and teachers should be more willing to say, I don't know, and let's figure it out. But I think what Richard and I hope to do, and I know to some extent we do it because we get emails about this, is to encourage kids and people to just find the universe so amazing that they want to know more. But I think it's not, I just don't feel it's my place as a, I'm more interested in encouraging people to like the real universe than I am in, and as an aside, they may lose their religion, which is fine, and I hope they do, but and they may decide that they have problems with the economic system as it is, but critical thinking is really what we want to encourage. And so once you start to encourage people to have critical thinking, then hopefully they apply it in everywhere, including in politics. And so anyway, that's, I think, what I'm more interested in is sort of the positive end of encouraging it, rather than denouncing things that are inappropriate, although we certainly do on Twitter and Facebook when we see something. I was just in Australia, and they paid $250 million for school chaplains when they're cutting the science budget, so I made sure I spoke out about that. But so the idea...
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I've heard a lot of people say that they were turned off science at school, and that's terribly sad. And I guess I was a bit turned off science at school as well. And for me, part of the problem was there's a kind of ritual belief that science always has to be taught as a practical subject. And I'm a bit of a heretic in this respect, because, of course, it's a practical subject, but nevertheless, it's also a beautiful subject. It's also an aesthetically beautiful subject. And somehow to reduce science to doing experiments with a Bunsen burner because you can, when you could be doing a sort of Carl Sagan looking at the stars, does seem to me to be a pity. It loses the poetry of it. We do need scientists to actually do science in the lab, of course we do, but we need everybody, whether they end up specialising in science or not, we need everybody to appreciate science, the aesthetic of science, the beauty of science, as Lawrence says, of the real world, because the real world, when you think about the real world, the fact that we're here on this planet, the fact that by this remarkable process of evolution, we've grown over billions of years a brain that's big enough to comprehend why we're here. I mean, what an astonishing thought that is. Of course, we have to have a brain like that, or we couldn't have an astonishing thought like that.
But I think I agree completely with Richard about the concern about applied as well. And I actually tried to corner your Prime Minister when I happened to be at an event with him in Switzerland a few years ago, but I didn't manage to. And not corner him. My plan, we'll try to embarrass him in front of 3,000 people, but I didn't get the chance. But there's one of the things that does concern me about the efforts of this government is to try and channel people to go to school to get a job, and that's not the purpose of education. And it discourages people from studying fields that don't obviously lead to jobs. And in fact, it's interesting to hear Richard talk about practicality, because in some sense biology is more practical. I'm very proud of the fact that no research I do has any application whatsoever to anything, and it's just knowledge. And so, and I think that's important. And in that regard, it often surprises me that people seem to ask always, why do that? As if the purpose of science is technology, but that's not the purpose of science. And people don't ask that question for music, art, or literature, but they ask it for science. The ideas, somehow it's the fact that, for me, the ideas are what are so exciting. The realization of your place in the cosmos, as Richard.
In a funny sort of way, science actually suffers from the fact that it's useful.
Yeah.
Because science is useful, people think that's all it is.
Exactly.
And that means that the people who are left running the country are everybody but the scientists, which is a great shame.
It absolutely is. And the science is no better. Yes. Good. You got the first applause of the night. Okay. We'll go. I get to choose, not you. That's my joy. No, so let's go towards the back first. Anyone up there? Maybe no one in the back has any questions. No one in the back has any questions. Oh, there we go. No, way up there.
Have you got a comment on the recent defamation of Sam Harris?
No. I mean, we all get defamed and we all survive. I think I don't know. Do you have any comments about it? I actually personally find it unfortunate that Sam responds to those things instead of ignoring them. I think the appropriate response is to ignore those things. But
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think Sam Harris is brilliant. I think that if you haven't read his books, read them.
Yeah.
The End of
Even if
Faith,
you
Letter to
disagree with
Christian
them.
Nation, and so on. He's incredibly clear thinking, incredibly clear speaking.
Yeah.
All the things that are thrown at him as being negative things, if you actually look at what he said, where he said it, and why he said it, it's absolutely clear. And he's made it clear over and over again. And I'm actually thoroughly fed up with the way people go after him. I wonder whether it's just jealousy.
I tend to think the responses lead other people to do it, and in this world, it's better, from my experience, to ignore those things and move on, and don't give them oxygen. And I will try and remind Sam of that next time I speak to him. But I know he cares about what he's doing, and that's why he gets upset when people misrepresent him. I mean, I disagree with him on another thing, it's particular Buddhism, but anyway, yeah. Anyway, so no other comments. And while you're back there, anyone else? Oh, right beside you. And then we'll come up.
Going back to education, do you think, as well as science, that critical thinking is a separate subject that should be taught? It's applicable across genres to history and politics as well. And do you think it would be a good idea for that to be taught?
I think it's a very good idea. What amazes me is that it needs to be taught.
Yeah.
I mean, isn't it obvious?
No, I mean, I think that it is interesting to me that kids, well, look, teachers have a hard job. Let's make it clear, okay? And so it's easy for us to talk at some level here. But it still is unfortunate to me that the school system is taught as if it has to teach kids a bunch of facts. It's not just science. And what's interesting is that we reteach them that. So when the kids start in, I don't know what you call it here, primary school, when they get to high school, teachers assume they haven't learned anything and they reteach it. By the time they get to university, I assume they don't know anything and reteach it. And it works. That's true to first approximation. But the point is that it's not, we teach people, especially in university, as if we want them to be clones of ourselves. But most kids who take physics are not going to be physicists. So what we should be teaching them are the things that are useful about science, the critical thinking, the way we think about the world in order to simplify it, and the way we are skeptical of ourselves. These are and also the thrill of not knowing. That's I want to harp on that again. In schools, most teachers, because in my country, most teachers who teach science don't have a science degree, so they're very uncomfortable, so they teach to the curriculum. And that means they're not comfortable departing from it or saying, I don't know. But that's the best thing that parents and teachers should learn to say, I don't know. Let's figure out how we can answer that. Because it's not knowing that's so exciting. That's what drives scientists. It's probably what drove Richard, drive me. I mean, is the idea that we don't know things. There's more to be discovered. Not that there's a bunch of stuff we know already.
I think part of critical thinking we need to teach perhaps is more than just logic, which is sort of, obviously we need to teach that, but statistics, probability, because that is a thing that people really very often get wrong. And there are various psychological things that we get wrong. Daniel Kahneman's recent book, what's it called? Slow and fast thinking, and slow thinking, has got some fascinating examples of fallacies that actually many people are, perhaps all of us, are susceptible to. And that's quite salutary.
Yeah. Okay, maybe we'll move further up. We'll come back later, but let's move further up. Let's get a woman. A question from a woman.
Hi, I'm really new to all this stuff, but I really got from your film like the celebration of like the brain and the capacity to think independently. I just question like if I want to choose to believe in something, like what your view is on that, like if that's fundamentally wrong or like problematic.
Well, you don't.
Go ahead. You start.
You don't choose to believe. You believe what there's evidence for.
No, I don't think that's the same thing.
Well, why do you believe what you believe if not by evidence?
I think that's a separate issue. I just want to choose to believe in something that, for whatever reason, makes me feel good.
Well,
you believe something because it makes you feel good.
Yeah.
Well, what a ridiculous reason to believe something.
let me. Okay, I'm going to take my.
No, hang on a minute.
I'm going to play good cop in a moment, but go ahead.
What makes you feel good is a terribly good reason for doing something, for going somewhere, for spending time doing something. It's a terribly good reason for doing all those things, but it's not a good reason for believing something. Because believing something is believing something about the world, and it's either true or it isn't. And whether you feel good about it has absolutely no bearing on whether it's true.
Richard's absolutely right there. Whether the Big Bang happened, whether you believe in it or not. Evolution happened, whether you believe in it or not. But you are not alone, first of all. Most people choose to believe things that make them feel good. Most people are, because humans are not just rational beings, they also irrational beings. What science teaches us is to question when you're believing something, is it just because you're feeling good about it, or is it real? And so what we would like, I think both of us would like to say to you, is to say, ask yourself, why am I believing in this? And question whether it's just to make you feel good. And if it's just to make you feel good and you understand it, maybe that's okay. But
That's what I'm trying to say.
But on the other hand, the problem is beliefs turn into actions. So let's say it makes you feel good to believe that gays are evil. And it does make some people feel good to feel that way because they feel better. Well, the problem is, if you believe in things that are just clearly not in accord with reality, then your actions will be stupid. Like, for example, let's say it makes you feel good to decide to walk out the 10th floor of a building on the window because you don't want to take the elevator. Okay? It may make you feel good. It'll make you feel good for about 1.5 seconds. Okay? And then, anyway, so I think the point is that we do things, and my training as a scientist, I'm sure Richard's, is to second guess, because we all want to believe. We're hardwired in many ways to want to believe things. And so the virtue of science is to just step back and say, recognize that you want to believe it, and ask yourself why you want to believe it, and at least do some internal questioning. How you decide to do it is your business in the end, but I think that's what we both encourage.
Have you read Douglas Adams' wonderful Dirk Gently's Holistic Detective Agency? There's a character there called the Electric Monk. It's a robot which you buy to do your believing for you.
Oh, excellent.
It's a labor-saving device. And the Electric Monk Mark II is capable of believing things they wouldn't believe in Salt Lake City.
He was great. Richard actually got to meet him. I never got to meet him. I'm really sad. I've used several chapter titles in honor of him. But okay, next. But thank you for having the courage to ask that question. Over here. We'll go for a streak here.
Hello to both of you. You'll be pleased to know I would like to talk about education again. I'm a secondary science teacher, so I teach 11 to 16-year-olds.
Good, you're doing God's work, as my friend said.
And part of my initiative within the school at the moment, me and another colleague are driving critical thinking forward and independent research skills, especially for our more able children. So recently, we've come across a bit of a sticky situation. We have form time in the morning where the children meet for 15 minutes, and part of their form time booklet was to look at creationism and form pieces of work that would represent creationism, and basically for us to teach it as if we were our re-teachers. So I brought it up that I wasn't happy with that, because I could have a year 11 class, in my GCSE class, the next period we're talking about evolution, and it's totally contradicting everything that I've spoke about in form time. So I've asked to go forward with that, not as it being teaching that's representing my beliefs also, but I will propose both theories. And I was met with quite a negative response from some teaching staff in total. So I was just wondering, what would your advice be moving forward? Being a teacher, being put in that position, what would you advise to teachers in that position?
You got a negative response for what?
For not wanting to teach both evolution and creationism.
Yeah.
I mean, what's your school board? What's your policy of your school board? What's your policy? I would go public.
Well, that's what me and some of my other colleagues did, because obviously we're all scientists in our department. We weren't happy with pushing that forward, but I quoted both of you when I was defending myself with it, so it'd be really nice. It would be really nice to know your opinion on it. Really.
What did they want you to teach?
It was the story of Adam and Eve.
Wait a minute. You're teaching at a school in this country, and they wanted you to teach the story of Adam and Eve.
Well, part of the activity was surrounding Adam and Eve and showing a YouTube video about it, but I like to build a lot of trust with my students, and they trust the knowledge that I impart.
I suppose, there's nothing wrong with teaching Adam and Eve as mythology, but did they want...
Well, this is where I'm worried that our children, as they are young minds, and we are... I don't want to use the word manipulating, but maybe scaffolding their minds. If I'm a figure that they trust, and they trust in the knowledge that I'm imparting on them, if I'm 15 minutes before their science lesson showing them a video about creationism, and then in the next step we're filling a GCSE question on evolution.
I think it's quite good to teach about myths from around the world. There are lots of beautiful myths, and Adam and Eve is just one of them. And so if you were to intersperse it with a Hindu myth, with a Chinese myth, with a Greek myth, with a Norse myth, with a South American Indian myth, and then toss in Adam and Eve as just one of those, that would be a perfectly good way to introduce Adam and Eve. But then I think you do need to make it clear that we now know a lot of facts about the origin of humanity, and Adam and Eve are not among them.
All right, thank you very much.
Well, yeah, no, it's a challenge, but it's really important that you're at the front lines, and it's real. I think your concern about this issue is really strong. But I agree completely with Richard. I actually think it's really important to expose kids. I would rather you talk about Adam and Eve as a myth than not talk about it at all. And I've just written a piece which one day will appear in the Times, they claim, New York Times. But about that, it's really important that we plant the seeds of doubt. And that means teaching these things as myth. And as I said the other night, I really think the purpose of education, partly, is to convince kids that not to believe what their parents tell them. Yeah. Okay, up front, why not?
Just a very generic question. If all of the world's religions were as bland as, say, the nice Quakers or the more liberal end of the Church of England, if there was no real kind of serious harm being done and it was just a philosophical thing for people, sort of vague deism, would you feel the same compulsion to sort of try and debunk it as you do now, or would it not matter so much?
Richard, do you want to say?
I would not feel the same compulsion to debunk it. I would feel the same desire to argue intellectually against it, but clearly it wouldn't be doing evil, it wouldn't be doing harm in the same way as some of today's religions are. I think it's too easy to sort of say, oh, well, if it's harmless, just, believe whatever you want to believe. Coming back to the earlier question, I do care passionately about what's true. And however nice and benign and benevolent your religion may be, if it is false, or if you can't demonstrate any evidence for it whatever, then I'd be very happy to have an intellectual argument with you, but I wouldn't fight it in a political way, the way I would fight a religion which is misogynistic, which is anti-gay, which cuts people's heads off, etc.
Well, yeah, I agree largely there, but I do think that, and I bet you agree in the end that with the statement, it's never really harmless. That's my point. If every person was an island, then they could believe whatever they want. But people then have an impact on other people, and they're kinder, gentler religions. But ultimately, if you call it a religion, it depends what you mean. If it's a cultural thing, if it's a philosophical school, it's one thing. But if it's a religion, then it comes down to ultimately belief in things that are false. And so, so I have that problem with everything, because ultimately I don't think it's harmless. In fact, there was a recent study, which you heard me talk about a few times now, but it's quite damning in the United States, that shows that kids who receive a religious education have a harder time distinguishing fact from fiction in every other area. And that already indicates that it's child abuse in some level. So yeah, but of course you have to remember that I'm coming at this, attacking religion is, for the most part, for me, been sort of a secondary thing. I continue to think that what we really need to do is excite people about the real world, and then religion will die on its own. So I don't spend as much time, except, of course, attacking the serious atrocities, and that's not just in the Islamic world and all over the place that religion does, and the incredible pain and suffering that people experience from potentially thinking for themselves. I get letters, and I know Richard gets at least as many, if not more. In the last year, I get so many letters from kids, people, not just kids, but adults, to say, it's small towns. I just started to not, to question things, and immediately I felt like I was a bad person, and all the people around me made me feel like I was a bad person if I even mentioned it. And that is an awful thing, and so people have to, that's one of the reasons I'm excited about the movie to some extent, is that it shows people that it's okay. It's okay to question. But anyway, so I think wouldn't be attacking those, but I think ultimately I think you don't need them. And there are other ways to meet there's no doubt that religion meets needs. If it didn't, it wouldn't have been ubiquitous. It's been throughout all of human history, throughout every society. It meets needs, both organizational and probably evolutionary needs. But I just don't see, because it meets those needs, I don't see that there are other things that could meet those needs that I think are healthier, personally. Okay, this side. Okay, let's go to that guy right there, because it's easy for you. This one, yeah.
So there was this mention in the documentary about how we are not evolved to understand the theory of very small, i.e. quantum mechanics and so on, and the theory of very fast. And that reminded me of the sort of argumentation that I've sometimes encountered with people who define themselves as spiritual but not religious, sort of mystic types, who have this really fuzzy definition of what they would like to call God, and say sort of define it in a very abstract sort of abstract way. They call it nothingness and so on. And you meet several of these people back in India where I'm from. So, and it becomes quite hard to sort of challenge what they are saying, because the argument there is that we, in our ignorance, we are not evolved to understand this nothingness that has resulted in what the universe is today, and hence there must be sort of a reason or purpose for this whole thing to exist. So what do you say to them?
Do you want me to start that one, or do you want? Yeah. Okay. I'm always the one who starts talking about nothing, so I guess that's. Look, spiritual has become a buzzword, and I don't. And the interesting thing I always want to say when people say they're spiritual, I always want them to define what they mean by that, because it just means that it doesn't have any meaning as far as I can tell, and it just means that people need something to feel good. Speaking to that woman back there, and so it may seem more innocuous, but both Richard and I've heard Richard say it, and I certainly say it. We get spiritual satisfaction. I get spiritual satisfaction from looking at a Hubble Space Telescope picture. I get awe and wonder and a sense of oneness with the cosmos, if you want, and all of that from reality. So spirituality is great if it derives from reality. And I think when people talk about the fact we don't understand something, and therefore there must be purpose, it reminds me of people, whenever someone sees something in the sky that they don't understand, they say it's a UFO, and it's got to be from some other planet. It's like they go to the least likely probability, and it's so improbable that we know it's not happening. And it's the same kind of thing, so that people say, just because we don't understand something, it has to be, A, we'll never understand it, which of course is completely obnoxious, and B, therefore it has to be God. And it's this lazy way of thinking, and so it's just not acceptable to me.
You can divide the world into spiritual poetic and things like that, which Lawrence and I both have, and material. We are both spiritual and materialistic. It is a huge step from there to saying, therefore, something supernatural. Mm-hmm. And the pernicious thing about the word spiritual is that it provides a cover for people who say, oh, well, then you must be religious. Or people have said to me, oh, you are overcome with wonder at the universe. Well, that means you are religious. Yeah. It does not mean that I'm religious, because when people hear the word religious, they immediately think supernatural. And to me, that's the big divide. The big divide is between supernatural and natural. And on the natural side, you can have awe, and you can be spiritual in that sense. Don't, for goodness sake, confuse that with supernatural. I think Einstein has a lot to answer for.
Yeah, I agree.
In giving people the impression that he was religious. Mm-hmm. Einstein used the word God. Einstein said, but he does not play dice. Meaning, but God does not play dice. Einstein said, what I really want to know is whether God had any choice in designing the universe. What he meant by that was, is there only one way for a universe to be, or could there be lots of different kinds of universe? That's a very interesting scientific question.
Yeah.
But phrasing it using God language, in the time when Einstein did it, I guess it didn't too much matter, but since that time, religious people have sprung on that, seized it, and said, Einstein's one of us. He was not one of you.
He also, I mean, they never seize on his other statements about how awful and silly and childish religion, organized religion was, and a personal God was just silly. But yeah, I think people use it as a cover, and we have to. We need to, Richard's talked about the poetry reality. I think he talked about it at the very beginning of the movie, and that's the spirituality we should encourage, the poetry of reality. Okay, next question. Let's see. Oh boy, oh boy. Oh, she's really excited over there. Okay. Yeah. She's answering. She did it for you. What? Now you get to ask the question? Yeah. Oh, jeez. I always get seduced that way. It's my problem. Okay.
Touching on what a few people have already said, I've got a 4-year-old daughter who at the moment is asking me about Father Christmas, and I try not to lie to her about anything. I don't make up any stories to make her go to bed or anything like that. So my question is, at what age do you start to tell the truth, and at what age is it kind of acceptable?
I don't know if Richard, I don't give parenting advice very much, except encourage your kids. I mean, the nice thing about lying to your kids is no, wait till I'm finished. Is that you then told them you lied, and then they learn to distrust you, which is a good thing. And so I actually try to, and I've only been learning this from my wife recently, actually, to try and encourage. I mean, if a kid asks something, to ask them what they think, not to always. I mean, I think parents want to be the source of answers, but in fact, I think parents should be the source of encouraging kids to puzzle through it themselves. I wish I'd done that with my daughter earlier,
I got kicked around the room for saying somewhere that when I was asked about Father Christmas by a 6-year-old child, I said,
"Don't tell me he's not real."
No, what I said was, well, let's work this out.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
How many chimneys are there in the world?
Yeah.
How long does it take to travel?
Exactly. That's what I'm talking about.
Chimney to chimney. Yeah.
No, look. I think.
Friends of mine have said that you'll ruin it for every other child in the school.
Yeah.
So kind of you can't.
Well, what about saying I don't know? I mean, what about saying, a lot of people think it's true. I don't know. And why do we think, And I mean, at this stage, again, it's that statement that I think parents need to be a lot more comfortable saying, which is I don't know. And then you might have them ask why. What do you think? Why do you believe it? I wouldn't necessarily guide a 4-year-old to the chimney question yet, but But I mean, look, look. My daughter. Anyway, my daughter used to get lots of Christmas presents when she was younger, and I think what's really neat about that experience for kids is the kids. I think most kids already don't begin to believe it, but they don't want to hurt their parents' feelings. And so at some point, kids, most of them who already say, I already knew that, but I didn't want to hurt your feelings. So I think that's a wonderful transition. People ask, did I have an epiphany about religion? And I didn't have an epiphany. I mean, I read a lot of everything when I was a kid, but I certainly read the Bible, I even read the Quran. And so for me, it was just a gradual transition to realize that the stories were silly. And I think most kids who are encouraged to think will realize that eventually. And that realization for them is it's better that they come to that conclusion, it seems to me, than that you guide them to that conclusion. Yeah.
I know a little girl whose grandparents, it is a real labor of love, made for her, made with their own hands, a most beautiful little doll's house. The grandfather did the carpentry, the grandmother painted it and made little curtains, and it was a tremendous labor of love. And then the mother of the child said it was from Father Christmas. Poor grandparents. I'm serious.
There you go.
I'm serious. In many ways, it's a pernicious legend. This idea that if you're good, you'll get presents. I mean, what a bad motive for being good.
Yeah.
I recognise I'm in a minority, but I think it's a pernicious legend.
Richard, did you celebrate Christmas when your daughter was younger?
Did I what?
Celebrate Christmas when your daughter was younger?
Yes.
No, but actually, it's an unfair question because I know there are other issues.
I mean, we live in a Christian country.
Yeah.
It's a Christian culture, and that's fine.
We celebrated that. We celebrated everything that involved presents. So we celebrated the Jewish holidays that involved presents. Anything, as long as it didn't involve God, we celebrated it where I came from, my family. Okay, next. Over there, this young man. Yeah, you. He's coming.
The thing is, I just wanted to ask, as time progresses and as science grows, do you think eventually religion will become obsolete, or will it just become a minority opinion and science will be the majority opinion?
Richard can start there.
I didn't really hear.
He said as science progresses, will religion become obsolete or just become a minority event?
There's a difference between hope and expectation. The signs are sort of encouraging that as not just science but education generally tends to drive out religion. It's not a total thing, but it does happen. What I'm less optimistic about is how widespread the speed with which education will spread. In those countries, Western European countries, for example, religion is dying, and all the signs are pointing in the right direction. The same is true in North America, although North America is lagging behind for reasons that are obscure.
But it's still monotonic. I mean, it's still what's nice is it's still decreasing.
Yeah.
And you could draw a straight line and make some assumption about it at time. But there's no doubt that it's definitely, and I think it's unambiguous that it's correlated to education. I think and so that's why we need, instead of bombing or whatever, in my opinion, much of the Islamic world, we need to encourage education. It's the only hope. And we need to encourage the education of women, which is the most important thing. Not for many reasons, but one, not least because women will be the primary caregivers inevitably of children. And so it's important that one of the best ways to undermine this Islamic nonsense, it seems to me, is to encourage the education of women. Now, how you do that is a hard question, and especially in closed societies. Ultimately, I think what you probably do is to help them economically, because I think a lot of what causes this reaction against is both fear and ignorance, and with economic well-being tends to come the flexibility of education and less fear of knowledge.
And there's also direct evidence from Gregory Paul, among others, that economic welfare tends to reduce the influence of religion. Those countries which have well-developed welfare programs for people, so there's less poverty and there's less anxiety, those are the societies that tend to have to be in the lead with respect to giving up religion. And that applies not just to countries in the world, it applies to states within the United States. Where there's poverty, where all the indicators of poverty, there also you tend to get a lot of religion.
Okay. I don't know how much longer do we have? How many?
We're on 8:05, so do you
I
want to
don't
do
know.
another 10 minutes?
Okay, good. No problem. Let's go to that gentleman there on the stairs. I could be bought, by the way, in case you... No, I'm just joking.
Lawrence mentioned that there's this correlation between education and a lack of religion, which takes me to my question of what on earth is happening in the United States? I mean, that would apparently be an outlier to that statement. America is home of perhaps, well, preeminent in many of the sciences, technology, and all the rest of it, yet its politicians have to declare their religion time after time.
Yeah.
God bless the United States of America at the end of every presidential speech and all the rest of it. What's the trajectory for the US in this area?
Well, I don't make predictions to the future. It's unfortunate and discouraging that there's this dichotomy. And I will repeat, this comes not from me, but I really do think it plays a role. Well, first of all, I think I've only said this in public once, but the United States scares me in the same sense Nazi Germans scared me. Because the United States has this mythos, and I don't think Britain does or any other country, that somehow they've been created by God to save the world. And that's a really dangerous thing. But I think that in some sense that's been encouraged. But I think the real problem in the United States is that we had separation of church and state. In England, you've got the Church of England, which is lazy and boring, and no one goes to it. And it's great because they don't have to do anything, and they keep getting government money, I assume. And they're supported. But in the United States, because there's a separation of church and state, the churches have to be entrepreneurial. And for better or worse, that works better. So they have to be entrepreneurial, and they exploit capitalism. They market themselves, and they market themselves very well in order to survive. And they've been very, very effective at it. So I think, as someone has suggested, if we just had a state religion in the United States, then it would be lazy and boring, and people could ignore it. And I think that's a part of it. But I also think it is this unfortunate ethos that's been encouraged for a long time, that somehow the United States is there to show the world how to live, and therefore it must be God-given. And I do think at the current time, religion is a matter of not just belief, but power and money. And there's a lot of power and money to be made in that. And you brought up Noam Chomsky, who I'm going to actually have a dialogue with in a few months in my institution. But, he would say that it's in the interest of people with power and money to make sure people are ignorant. Right? That's always the interest, because it's easier to either make them ignorant or afraid. It was Goering who said that. It doesn't matter whether you have democracy or dictatorship. It doesn't matter. Make people afraid and they'll do whatever you want. And so I think it's in the interest of people to encourage that fear. And so that also is a big factor in my opinion. But it's hard. I'm not a sociologist and I don't know all the reasons. But I do think that when I go in my country, that you see these mega churches that exist and make a tremendous amount of money by marketing, and I can't help but think, and then they get access to the media, and I can't help that. I think that that's a part of this need for them to do that.
I've always thought that's right. I think that the entrepreneurial spirit in America does that. But although you say they don't get government support, they get tax breaks.
Yeah, no, which is really disgusting. You're right. They get
effect.
That's right. And in fact, it would be the greatest thing in the world to tax churches. It would be a huge, because as you know, in my country we created a religion, or at least a science fiction writer created a religion, and said it.
Mormonism is another recent.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And he said, and what's his name? L. Ron Hubbard said, if you want to make a lot of money, create a religion.
You don't actually need any qualification in America to call yourself reverend.
You and I both are. I think we're both ordained.
Yes.
We are both. We can perform marriage ceremonies. I can at least, and I think you can. in at least all the 50 states.
You just declare yourself to be a reverend, and you can say my front room is my church, and you get all the tax breaks.
Yeah, and I have a card. And I paid $39 for this, but I also have a big thing in my car that says "Minister in performance of his duties," so I can park anywhere. That was my reason. Okay. Oh, maybe let that person in that dark corner speak. No, not you. Sorry, he's darker. But okay, there we go. Not skin-wise, I meant he happens to be darker skin-wise too. But anyway, go ahead, keep going.
So we never got a chance to finish it.
Yeah, I know. We'll get there. We'll get there. But I chose him for the moment.
Yeah, I was hoping if you could both tell us what was it that made you realise that you need to become. Now, I hope you don't mind the term, but militant atheists.
Well, you can answer. I don't think either of us are militant atheists. Are you a militant atheist?
I wouldn't like to use the term myself, but I mean, obviously, I don't believe it myself, but that's what a lot of people will describe.
I'm a militant a-fairyist, a militant a-leprechaunist, a militant a-unicornist. I'm a militant anything that doesn't exist.
Okay, and I think that's, and I assume it goes hand in hand with being a scientist in some sense, right? I mean, yeah. But let me say that what amazed me, and I think I said it in the movie. I did, in fact, at Sydney Opera House. I started to be called a militant atheist only, relatively recently, I guess, the last 3 or 4 years, but partly in response to my book, A Universe from Nothing, where all I did was ask the question, could you create a universe without God? I never even said, I just said, can you do it? And, oh yeah, you can, it's a good thing. And I became militant. So no one ever calls people militant theists. And it really amazes me that already is a word that's applied with value judgment to suggest some closed-mindedness. When in fact, I think all we're doing is asking people to ask questions and think for themselves. And Richard says that you don't get to hear the idiotic radio commentator in that movie who was interviewing Richard, or maybe you do if it was good sound, because it's actually in the movie. But that's what Richard said at some point. I'm not telling kids that they're going to hell. I'm asking kids to think for yourselves. And that's really, and if that's militant, then we're certainly both militant, and I think it comes from being scientists, I think, which is part and parcel.
Maybe I was a bit maybe I was
they were
a bit
applauding
unfair.
for me for a second. No, I'm just joking. Anyway, okay.
I think I was a bit unfair to say the same as leprechauns, because the fact is that there aren't very many people believing in leprechauns, but there are a lot of people believing in various sorts of gods. And all sorts of very, very evil things are done in their name. Yeah. And therefore there is some reason to be more militant about being an atheist than about being a leprechaunist. Yes, I think that there is some reason to be politely militant. Notice that militant atheists never kill anybody for disagreeing with them, never whip them with lashes, never stone them. All we do is argue with them. Our weapons are words, and that is a very, very significant difference from militant theists. Not all theists are militant, of course, but there are plenty who are. Mm-hmm. And they do not assault you with words, they assault you with stones and whips and machetes.
Absolutely. Okay, I'll let you get applause. Let me add one thing that I used to try. I don't label myself by anything, by the way, except I guess I do label myself as a scientist. The only ist I give myself is scientist, but other than that, I don't label myself. But I used to try to think what was closest, and the word I used to choose was one I got from our late friend Christopher Hitchens, who the movie, as you notice, was dedicated to. Who coined the term anti-theist, or I don't know if he coined it, but I used to think of it myself in those terms. Namely, I could not prove that there's no purpose to the universe. What I could say with absolute certainty, however, is that I didn't want to live in a universe with a God. Okay, so I couldn't prove there's no God, but I just didn't want to live in a universe with one. But that's now changed. There's a better word that's been coined that I like to use, which is I'm an apatheist, because I just don't give a damn. I mean, it doesn't come up. That's the unfortunate problem, and I always sometimes worries that people seem to think that there's this urgent science versus God debate. There isn't. Scientists never discuss God. The issue is never raised. I've been a physicist for 30 years, and I've never heard at any scientific meeting, not once, the issue come up, because they know we're trying to discuss the real universe. God's irrelevant. So God is just irrelevant, and we don't care. And Stephen Weinberg said most scientists don't think enough about God to even know if they're atheists.
But just dissent a little bit from what you said before. With respect to Christopher Hitchens, I can't prove there's no God, but I don't want to live in a universe
with one. I wouldn't want to live in a universe with one.
I wouldn't want to live in a universe with one either, but if there was one, I would believe it. I mean, the fact is, if it's true, it's true. It isn't true, fortunately, but if it was true,
then you'd accept it.
Then it's no argument to say, oh, I don't want to live in that kind of universe. Tough. If there is a God, I'm afraid that's just tough.
Exactly. And I think I said in the movie, the multiverse is something I don't particularly like in some ways, because I trained to hope that I could demonstrate why the universe has to be the way it is. But as you say, if that's the way it is, I'll just live with it. And it was interesting to me. I was on stage with an awful apologist with initials WLC, who I won't mention the name of because I can't mention his name. But we always get asked this question: what would make you a believer? And I said, well, look, just simple. If I go up tonight and I see the stars realign, and say in English or ancient Aramaic, you give your choice, I'm here. Okay? Then I'd say, maybe there's something to it. And what amazed me was when he was asked what would stop him to lose his faith. It was the lamest thing I've ever heard. He said maybe if his daughter was killed. And I just thought that was a really... Anyway, we can go back.
Haven't we all seen conjuring tricks at least as impressive as the stars?
Yeah. Anyway, next.
Can you do one last question?
Okay, who's brought the best question here? You know what? I'm gonna take the guy in the very back, because what the heck, he got here late.
As organised religion goes down in the Western world, and the rise of New Age alternative faiths or religion or beliefs, such as homeopathy...
Could you speak up a bit,
I was going to say, could you speak up, because Richard and I can't... No, it's there, it's working, you just got to speak up louder.
Shall I start again?
Okay.
As organised religion in the Western world decreases and New Age alternative beliefs increase, do you feel that we spend too much time as non-theists tackling Abrahamic religions and not enough time tackling the alternative New Age sort of things that are just as ridiculous?
Yeah.
You start.
Well, yes, you've got a good point there, that there's an awful lot of nonsense. I mean, homeopathy, all that kind of thing. Somebody said, I think it was G.K. Chesterton said, if people give up religion, they don't believe in nothing, they start believing in anything. And so there is a lot of pseudoscience, a lot of things which should be battered by critical thinking in just the same way as religion. There are skeptical organizations, both in Britain and America, dedicated to debunking all that kind of alternative nonsense, homeopathy, telepathy, things like that. And oddly enough, they resent people who bracket atheism with their kind of skepticism. Mm-hmm. I was once presented with an award by the American Skeptical Association, and in my acceptance speech I said, why don't you go after religion as well? And I was attacked for that. It turned out the reason for that was that they were worried about fundraising. They were worried about losing sources of money. But actually, I think we should turn the searchlight of our critical faculties on all these kinds of things, on all beliefs which are not evidence-based and which fly in the face of evidence. And you're right, it would be tragic if we got rid of religion only to discover that we were beset by witches' covens and ley lines and general sort of Glastonbury stuff.
Well, I think that I agree, and that's one of the reasons why. In fact, that's one of the reasons why I have debated with my friend Sam Harris sometimes on the issue of Buddhism, which I don't see as any different. in terms of nonsensical. I've always said that, the Dalai Lama may sound kinder and gentler, but if he believed what he said about science, he would resign because his position is based on reincarnation, which is garbage. One of the interesting things that you point out, which is interesting, is that people who believe one thing think the other people are crazy. And yet, I'm not religious, but I believe in the quantum mechanics allows me to make the world a better place or something. And it's always interesting, and the best thing to do is pit them against each other. I know two people, scientists, who used to do that when people wrote them. They'd get a crackpot in one area, and then they'd get another person, and they'd say, you know what, I can't answer your question, but this person over here can answer your question. And then they tell each other, and they both write back and say, why did you direct me to that guy? He's a nut, And so I think, in some sense, well, what I said in the movie, ridiculing, I think is important, but it's equally important to ridicule those areas. And I think Buddhism is an area that's getting a free pass right now. And I think, personally, I plan to turn some of my guns towards that because I think it's...
But I think you do Sam Harris an injustice.
No, I don't, Sam.
He does not believe in reincarnation.
Hold on. You were at the event with me when I asked him about that. Do you remember? I said, Sam, it's based on reincarnation. He said, how do you know reincarnation doesn't happen? But I think, I know, I don't think he really does, but I think he's so sensitive to it that I think I'd like to encourage him. He's influenced me a lot, so I hope to influence him a little bit. I will tell that. Let me say that because I didn't mean it. I admire Sam a lot. So I will say that my own approach towards things has changed in part due to Sam, because what I used to say was, look, you don't have to be an atheist to believe in evolution, because it happened. And I would make the effort to try and emphasize that that you didn't have to give up your belief in God to accept science, and I wanted to try and, as some people say, be an accommodationist in that sense. But what Sam had said one day when I was talking to him is, but that doesn't mean you're being a hypocrite if you don't say, well, okay, but the doctrines of the world's religions are nonsense, and if you're not willing to say that, you're a hypocrite. And that really, really resonated with me, and I think impacted upon me. So anyway, thank you very much for coming, and I guess we're going to sign some things, but thank you very much.
Don't go just yet. Just a few matters of housekeeping. We've got the Pioneer room just down the hall, so if you take a right out of the auditorium, keep on going. That's where we're doing the book signings. And we've asked, can we not ask Richard or Lawrence to pose for photographs, because it takes rather a long time, and that'll detract from the book signing, so can we not do that? And finally, can I just ask you to bear with me for a moment? I'm just going to abuse my privilege as chair for a moment. This evening has been brought at the same weekend as my partner's birthday, and she said, you'd better make it up to me. So, Sue, will you marry me?
You didn't give a chance to say no, though, but I mean, it's okay.